Order. Today is Monday, September 11th. It is 5:01. This is our town council budget hearing. The town manager, all of the town council members, town attorney, and town clerk are present. At this time, we'll open it up for public comment. If there's anyone here that would like to speak, and maybe that isn't an employee. Seeing no one, we will close that. We will open the public hearing budget items. I forgot to ask beforehand, but Becky, do you want me to read through this before we table it? Read the description and then open it and table it?
Yes.
Okay. Item A is Resolution 23-104, Fiscal Year 24 Proposed Ad Valorem Millage Rate. A resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Fort Myers Beach adopting the proposed ad valorem millage rate for the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida for fiscal year 2023-2024, commencing October 1st, 2023, and ending September 30th, 2024, for the purposes of providing sufficient funds for the general fund, setting the second and final public hearing for Monday, September 25th, 2023, at 5:01 p.m. to adopt the final operating and ad valorem millage rate for fiscal year 2023-2024 and providing for an effective date. So we have to open this, then we have to table it and move down to the next item. Is there a motion to table this to move on to item B?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, that item is tabled for now. That brings us to item B, Resolution 23-105, Fiscal Year 24 Tentative Budget. A resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Fort Myers Beach adopting the tentative budget for fiscal year 2023-2024, commencing October 1st, 2023, and ending on September 30th, 2024, setting the second and final budget adoption public hearing for Monday, September 25th, 2023, at 5:01 p.m. and providing for an effective date. This one also we have to open and then table to go to item C. Is there a motion to table item B, Resolution 23-105?
So moved.
Is there a motion and a second? Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion is tabled. That brings us to item C, Resolution 23-103, Fiscal Year 23-24 Tentative Fee Schedule. A resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Fort Myers Beach adopting the tentative fee schedule for fiscal year 2023-2024, commencing October 1st, 2023, and ending on September 30th, 2024, and providing for an effective date. Joe?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Joe Onzik, Director of Finance for the Town of Fort Myers Beach. So what we have here is a presentation on the proposed changes to our fees. The first slide, I'm prepared.
Can we come down a little bit?
Okay. The financial impact of the fee changes that were proposed by the Community Development Office. We have the compliance agreement fee. They tell me there's only about one of these per year on average. There has not been a fee charged for that previously, so they're proposing a fee of $100, so the annual impact would be $100. Lien search fees. The average this past year has been $768 annualized. $768 annualized. The current fee is $35. Proposed fee is $50, so that's a $15 increase. That would result in an increase of revenue of $11,520. There is a special magistrate fee proposed. It is unknown as to how often that would be imposed. There is no fee at this point. They're proposing a fee of $250.
Could you just, so what would that fee be for? We already charge people when they go through the special magistrate fee, right?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, that is the reason for this charge, is that it's to cover the administrative costs.
So at the most recent magistrate hearing, Joe, there, and a town attorney, there was an administrative fee.
Yes, I mean, typically you charge an administrative fee if basically the person loses the case, but you don't charge a fee if they win the case.
And is that $175?
I think it was about that.
That's what I remember. So is it going up to $250 or is this different?
I'm not quite sure why. I don't know. I wasn't consulted about this. I'm
Okay.
not
Okay.
sure.
I mean, it's-
But you really can't have a fee to use the services of the special magistrate if you are basically adjudicated not guilty.
No, and I wouldn't want that. I also, it seems punitive, I guess, to when folks actually charge up or show up to dispute their ticket or whatever the issue is, and they make an eloquent argument, but for whatever reason the magistrate decides against them, they pay a fee in addition to their fine. That's significant. But you, I think, Madam Town Attorney, I don't want to speak for you, but I think when we talked about it the other day, you said that's not uncommon.
That is typical. And the reason for it is that otherwise people might just always appeal their fines and that sort of thing. And when you have a situation where people are appealing fines, you've got to take the code enforcement person essentially off the street into the hearing, and they've got to show up for that. And then you're paying the special magistrate, you're paying the code person to
So-
sit there.
And that's
So-
fair concern, but I guess what I would be concerned about, just, I don't want to belabor this, but somebody has a heartfelt dispute about their parking ticket, and I know we raised the parking ticket fee or fine recently, so they come in, give a heartfelt defense of their parking ticket. They lose. They not only have to pay their parking ticket, which I think is now what, $77, plus they get hit with a $250 administrative fee. Is that how it's going to be proposed? Joe, I know you're not the person that administers
Right.
this program, but
It's,
Well, I would ask if Steve, I think he's here, if he could perhaps address the question because he'd be more familiar
I guess my
with
question is
it.
it going from 175 to 250? Or is this a different fee?
Yeah, the intent is just to pay for the services that are provided. It would be a bump up in a fee if it was decided against them.
Steve, is the program not self-funding now
Right, I mean.
with the
why-
175? I
Yeah,
guess?
the intent is just to try to match the fees that we are being charged, just to pay for those fees.
Gotcha. But I mean, so currently with the 175, assuming that's what that number is, it's not covering the cost of the magistrate?
So
And the staffing?
typically, at least historically, from what I've seen, is the special magistrate often waives that fee, or essentially always does. Anyway, this is more just to, or maybe it was just that special magistrate.
Yeah, with that particular hearing, she wasn't waiving any admin fees if you lost. But that may have been a unique example. I don't know.
Could be.
So
But yeah, because the way I kind of read it, because it says 0 here, and now we know we charge 175 if you lose. So I'm concerned that we go from 77 to 175 plus 250 plus 77 if they lose. That's a pretty good bump up.
it seems
Yeah, you
punitive.
just- you just legally can't
it's just
charge
one.
for the ability to go to the special magistrate. But you can charge an administrative fee
No, I got you.
if they lose.
But if
So-
you've got a $77 ticket and you have an honest dispute for it, you come in, you make your case, take your morning off, and you walk away not only having to pay your fine, which is fine because that's what the magistrate decided, but then you get a $250 fee in addition to that. Again, if the program is not self-sustaining currently, I think you could at least make a case for it. But do we know whether it's? I know we just recovered. We're going through this hurricane. It's chaos. But I guess my question is the special magistrate program self-sustaining with the 175 admin fee, or is the fee waived so much where it's not self-sustaining, and that's why you're advocating 250?
I think some of these fees are adjusted just for an increase in costs in general. Some of them are bumped up a little bit, some of them are clarified. And this one, it's bumped up. I think it's maybe being misconstrued. It's going from the cheaper to a little bit more.
So then this is not accurate, that the current fee would be 175 on this, and you're proposing 250?
Right.
All right, I think you understand now, Joe? It's supposed to be 175 instead of 0 there? Or is this?
Yes, I understand. Okay. I was just working with the fee schedule that I was given, so I didn't.
That's okay.
I
So,
didn't know.
Joe, now you've got 175 there versus
Sure.
0. Does that mean we could lower it from 250 to 175?
That sounds good to me.
All right. I'd like to come lower, but,
Or keep
Okay.
it exactly as it is now, essentially.
right, keep it as we is
Right.
now, yeah.
Okay.
Still seems a little high, but at least we now know where we're at.
The next proposed change is a
Actually,
cha-
Joe, before you move on, just before the next budget hearing, the final budget hearing, can you look into that to make sure that that 175 does in fact cover the fees for the magistrate? So that when we come back to look at this the second time, we can talk a little more educated about what we're proposing here with the fee?
Yes, I can try to.
That's a good
to
idea.
Research that and figure that out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The next fee is for a 500-foot notification fee. This, apparently, this last year, there were 6,018 that were sent out, and so this is a proposal to charge 150 per mailing, which, if in this case,
You mean
would-
$1.50?
I'm sorry, did I say, how did I say it? Okay.
150, yeah.
$1.50 per each item, so that would result in, based on this year's numbers, a $9,000 increase in revenue.
So just for people who are watching, if someone applies for a variance, you've got to notify your neighbors within 500 feet. And that's the
Yes.
cost of that mailing.
That would be the cost of the mailing and the handling of all of that.
So right now, we don't charge anything for that?
That's what I'm told, unless that's wrong too, but that's what I was told. Okay, then the next ones are for the beach access wedding permits. Apparently, it had been $350 an hour, and for a party of 10 or less was $150 per hour, but those fees have been waived since Hurricane Ian, so we have not been collecting any fees, and the proposal is just to make the fees 0.
You know, these two, I've had an issue since our last budget about this. I wasn't in favor of these two specifically. I think there should be a charge, but the $350 an hour seems a little steep to me for beach access. But I would be in favor of keeping the $350 and the $150, but just as a flat fee versus an hourly fee to use the beach access, because we do have public works that has to go out and clean up and empty the garbage cans and do things like that after us. So I think that's to me, that would be a fair charge.
I think that's a great idea.
And I would just say that, I think the reason that staff had last year was because they would prefer to direct people to Newton Park and the Mound House where they have restrooms and water and all the facilities.
Yeah, I remember, but now we're without Newton Park. So.
Right, now
Now
Newton Park's
it's
not-
changed a little bit, but
What about though if people just go out to the beach and get married? They're not at a beach access. We don't have Newton Park. I can understand it if they're at the Mound House, but what if they're just going to go out to the beach and get married
Which I think happens a lot.
all the time?
But you think about it, either you're going to be in a beach access, or you're probably going to be on private property or standing in the water.
And that happens all the time.
It's a public beach. It's First Amendment right, I
Yeah.
would think, right?
Yeah, and I don't know, I don't know how many of those people get permits. Honestly, I haven't asked. I don't think many, though. It looks like they're usually fairly ad hoc things.
I just think obviously we're not going to be able to control every single person that wants to go out to the beach and get married. I understand your point, Councilor Woodson, but, there are some people that would be more than happy to pay a fee to be able to go out and use it, and I think having that there just makes sense, because there is some labor that is involved from Public Works to go in and clean up after that.
And I think there's weddings that are just people who go out there and stand on the beach and do their thing and leave, and there's people who set up altars, chairs, the whole 9 yards. So those are different kind of.
And I think, doesn't paying the fee allow them to reserve that particular access
It
too,
does.
which is
Yeah.
probably some comfort if you've got a big group of people coming?
And I can see that if they're setting up chairs and doing all that and setting up an altar or whatever they're doing, that I understand. But there's still so many people that just walk out there and they're standing and they get married. So if they're setting up a church-like setting and having guests, yeah, then there's a permit and a fee.
Are you okay with just keeping the fees in there for a flat fee versus an hour
Yes.
charge? Okay.
Yep. But only if they're going to need assistance.
So I assume there's not people out there who thought they were married, but they're really not married because they didn't pay their fee.
Some people might be thankful for that. You never know.
Saves on the divorce costs.
So then, just to quickly recap this one display then, so we're going to change that to a $350 flat fee or $150 flat fee. We're going to change the special magistrate fee to $175 and leave the rest the same for the next hearing.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Okay.
then if you can compile what to
The cost.
verify that we're not going backwards with the administrative fee, but we're not also doubling what we need to cover that magistrate fee.
Yes. Okay. So this is the next set of fees, and this was taken from the town council meeting on April 17th, and this has to do with the beach vendor licenses for personal watercraft, parasailing, beach furniture. So I have the number of licenses there, 11, 8, 28, and then the current fee is $685. The proposed fee is $375 for personal watercraft, parasailing, and then $120 for beach furniture. So that reduction would then bring down the annual revenue based on those number of licenses by $21,710.
Now, does this reflect the 3% increase year over year that we spoke about in April?
Yes,
That is what this is?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, I don't have it shown here, but we would start out with the 375, and then thereafter it would be a 3% increase each year.
And Joe, is it fair to say when people see this, they're going to see that that's a loss, of 21,000? But
We never
this was just
collected.
implemented just before the storm hit last year, so it really is not
That's-
technically a loss. It's just a numbers showing that it would be a loss.
That's true. That's the potential because we have not even all of those licenses were not even renewed this
Right.
year.
Right, because they haven't been in use.
This will actually be a net increase over what we had in fiscal year 2022, 2021, 2022.
It could very well
Yeah.
be. Okay, and then the last thing here, these are proposed changes that just clarify the fees, so there's no impact, because these fees had been listed separately for street performer permits and street performer background checks. It was $75 for each piece, but you can't have a permit without a background check, so they're proposing to eliminate those separate fees because they were confusing. So there'll no longer be a separate permit fee and a separate background check fee. And then the same with if they were to obtain their permits after September 30th, basically the fees were doubling to $150 for a permit or background check. So we're going to, it's proposed that those all be eliminated and instead have one fee that's like for a combination permit and background check of $150. And then if it's after September 30th, then it would double to $300. So there's no change in revenue.
Well, before we move on, so is a background check required for every year? If someone is a returning performer, do they still have to do that?
I don't know. Based on the fee schedule, it would seem so, but
I would
Yeah.
think so.
And I would think so, because things do change. I mean, things pop up that maybe weren't appearing before, or it just happened.
Happened after they were issued their permit.
Right. Just
All
like
right.
random background checks when you're in the corporate world.
so I think that takes care of it. Oh, and then we have probably the most interesting one. And this would be the short-term rental fee. Councilor Veach had asked me, I think you'll notice this is different than what I originally sent out in the packet. And in the original packet that I sent out, I did not have the cost of enforcement personnel factored in. And so I went to the person who is responsible for enforcement and asked how many hours, would they estimate they spend each week on average, and their answer was 25 hours per week. And so if you take 25 hours out of a 40-hour week and take that percentage and multiply times their total costs, like this for their salary and benefits, it came out to $45,000. If you add that in, the total cost of the program that's budgeted for FY24 is $99,081, and we only are budgeting $100,000 worth of revenue. So basically, almost the entire amount of the fee is going to covering the cost of the program, and that's based on collecting $100,000, which would equate to roughly 333 units, which of course is down in comparison to what it could actually end up being. But for next year, if we were to apply the entire amount of the fee collected to covering the cost of this program, then we would basically break out even or have $919 left we could contribute to workforce housing. So the proposal is to first make sure our cost is covered, and anything over and above that that's collected in fees would go into workforce housing, and that's how it's phrased in the resolution to approve the fee schedule, if you're agreeable to that.
Yeah, well, I think it makes sense. I think that was the whole point of imposing originally the $50 fee way back in the day is to cover the cost of the program. And this number, I'm guessing, will change year over year depending on which short-term rentals come back online, which ones don't. So
Yes.
this number will fluctuate.
Yes, it should.
So did you say there's only 333 projected short-term rentals?
For next year, in terms of the amount of revenue, yes. I mean, there could be more, but that's what was projected.
So how many short-term rentals were there before Ian?
Oh, boy.
I think we were over 2,000, I think. I think there was like 2,000 or 2,500 was a working number for that.
Okay, that could be. I don't know that, so
So we're thinking that there's only going to be, say, 10 to 15% short-term rentals back in fiscal 23, 24.
to be conservative, yes, it could be much more than that. Hopefully it is.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Which I don't know, seems kind of consistent looking around.
Yeah.
Looking at the number of places, newer rentals that are not anymore. And I think this is consistent when there's someone in the state proposed putting a cap on short-term rental registration fees, and some municipalities are saying between $300 and $500. It costs the municipality between $300 and $500 a year per unit to cover the cost of that rental, including enforcement.
So this appears to be on par with what everybody's saying. I'm in favor of what you've suggested.
Okay, and that wording is included in the resolution already for you.
And Joe, then what you're presenting here reflects the elimination of the $50 per room.
$100.
No, it was $100 per bed
That
in
has gone
addition.
away.
So that's gone.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So I think that's the end of the changes that were proposed, and this is just verbiage explaining the short-term rental that, it's already understood, so I won't expect you to read that. It's just for the record. So that's
So Joe,
Yeah.
are any of the changes that we just talked about have any significant amount or any significant change in your budget, the resolution 23-105?
No, it doesn't. If we go back, short-term rental, we do not. This could change. The budget doesn't absolutely have to reflect what we're changing here in terms of fees. I mean, it could be different, and then the actual revenue collected would be different. So it's not essential that we go back and now change every line item in the budget to reflect this. Okay. And so I wouldn't necessarily do that. I can do that, especially in terms of the allocation of short-term rental fee this time around, where we could put the whole thing towards the program, the whole 100,000. If we collect more than that, then it can certainly go into workforce housing per the resolution.
I'm just trying to get to if it's okay to go ahead and vote on moving this item to the next hearing?
Oh, yes.
We don't have to table it and come back to it. You're okay with moving forward?
I am, because if you go back even further, there's no changes here. I mean, in terms of total, this is a reduction, but then this was an increase of almost the exact same amount. So, in total, it's a wash.
Okay.
So I just have a question too on the Bay Oaks Recreation Campus memberships and things. I remember this being a big discussion last year at budgets. Did this take us back to prior to 2022, what's listed here? Or are these the increase? Because we are going to see Bay Oaks Recreation and Kids Back and that type of thing. So are these the original numbers from 2022 and not implemented 2023? Or, I'm sorry, 2021 and not implemented 2022?
They should. I mean, what is in your packet is the fee schedule that was in effect for 2023, and
Okay.
then any of these changes that we've just reviewed were made. But so it should be the same fees as have been in effect for 2023.
Okay, am I thinking wrong? I remember there being a big hullabaloo from parents and everything else about the increase in the fees.
There was
For
at
Bay
the
Oaks?
there was at the Bay Oaks committee, and then it was talked at length in September of last year. These fees specifically, I believe you spoke.
I did,
Um,
yeah, and
so
I
I
cannot
think
remember what the fees
Yeah,
were.
Well,
they were moderated
Yeah.
They
as a
were.
result of that input from the public, and I think
Okay.
they're pretty modest, and everybody seemed to be comfortable at that
Okay,
point.
I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
those changes to bring them back down got in here, because I can't remember what the fees were
yeah.
that, okay.
Yeah. And I do remember the target for the fees was to increase the revenue to be 25% of the cost. So it means even with the increased fees, we're still subsidizing pretty heavily.
Right,
Right.
right. But just with everything getting back, I want to just make sure that these are in line.
Yeah, I remember the discussion, and the fees that were listed in here are listed in here were the results of the conversations that were had last year's budget before the storm.
Okay,
And I'll just from a policy standpoint, I think it's important as we look forward, because I know our town manager and our director of operation have, I think, wonderful, grandiose visions for this new municipal center, which would include recreational facilities. And I think now that we've really lost the only private gym on the island, I think if we do our rec center correct, I know there's a lot of people who would much rather pay their gym fees. My wife and I have pay a fee off island, much rather pay it to Bay Oaks than
Right.
go off island. So I think we can, as we create some facilities that are great, and we're not competing with the private sector anymore, and if we get involved in the Silver Sneakers program, which means, you get a lot of folks in the Silver Sneakers program don't pay at all. They get help with their gym fees. So I think the potential is great to have some nice recreational facilities on the island, where people aren't driving off the island to go work out anymore. They could work out here on the island. So I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I just want to plant that seed a little bit.
And just to be clear now, Andy, are we working towards opening up the old Bay Oaks gym when the kids are in school for recreational activities, so it'll do kind of a double duty?
Correct, yes, sir.
Because I'm concerned it's a long, the new municipal building is a long way away.
right. But the gym is there
Yeah.
for the kids.
Yeah, that's part of our interlocal agreement with the school board, is to have that open for the after-school program.
Yeah, and we have them before, while they're in school, we shouldn't need to have it available for them, though.
Right, and it wouldn't be. Any other questions for Joe? All right, is there a motion to approve moving Resolution 23-103 to the next hearing date of September, where's that?
25th.
September 25th at 5:01?
So moved.
Is there a second? I'll second. Any more discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries unanimously. That'll bring us back to item B, Resolution 23-105. Is there a motion to reopen this tentative budget, Resolution 23-105?
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
I would just ask the town manager and/or the mayor, but whoever wants to, take a 10,000 foot, and I know it's clear as mud right now, but as we look at the big picture for this town and some of the big projects that we have on the table, this mesh of county, state, federal, could you give us an update as to how you see it all coming together in a somewhat simplified fashion? Because I know there's a lot of variables.
Yeah, good luck
And I
with
just
that.
think the public would find that interesting. I think there's, you guys, people are doing a great job. I think we probably owe it to the public to at least let them know. And I know there's a lot of variables still out there, but
Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, I think, one thing we're going to be seeing, especially with a new town hall, for instance, as we move forward with that, we're kind of backloading it a little bit with resiliency money and money from FEMA that way. Instead of, getting a dollar figure today for what the values are today, we're putting it 3 years out so we get the value of what the materials and cost of labor and everything will be 3 years out, 2 years out.
and Andy, I don't mean to interrupt you, but when you say really resiliency money, are you talking about the money that they were going to reimburse us for our town hall that was just destroyed, or is this different money?
This is additional, this is like grant money that they pay out just for what we're wanting to do with our new building to make it an EOC, to make it, resilient and fortified to withstand what just happened here last year.
So we'll get from FEMA the replacement cost of our old town hall, and then additionally some resiliency funds and potentially some money from the state to help cover the cost of this municipal center?
That is correct. FEMA pays you for rebuilding it as is where it was.
Right.
We don't plan to do that. Even if we don't build it where we were and swap the properties and decide there it's somewhere else. So we know we're not building back where we were. So that is part of the equation. But we will get money from them. There'll be money from the state. Hopefully, several pots. There's some other options with grants and things like that as EOCs go and try to build this to where it's I've mentioned this before. We want people to say, not, oh God, my goodness, what were they thinking back in 2023? But oh wow, look what they were thinking back in 2023. So we're going to build it back. I hate to use the term build it back, better, but we really are. I mean, it's going to be a better facility. Same thing with the park. Same thing with the Bay Oaks. We're trying to maximize our dollar now with the loan money. We've got that. That's why we're working there with the ball field and those type of things. We're looking at some options with the swimming pool. So there's going to be a lot of things happening over the next, 6 to 8 months that are just completely going to be thinking differently than, well, obviously it is because you didn't think you'd be in this position at all. So it's a completely different mindset than where you were this time last year prior to the hurricane with just, spending so much money to change the ball fields and to build a community center in the middle of the park and that type of thing. So we're kind of thinking different, looking for all sorts of revenue streams to bring in here to maximize that. Going to be working with the county on what we're going to do down in Times Square. We talked a little bit this morning about that group this morning. There's also ULI. The counties, we've talked to them a little bit. They want to come to us and work with us on some of the stormwater projects along Estero. So there's a lot of things we're working. And so to me, what comes with working with the county is dollars. So we want to make sure that we bring them to the table and continually try to milk them for as much as we can. I don't know what's there, but obviously they have a road here, parks here. So we're going to take advantage of those options.
Is the one piece of the puzzle that you didn't mention, just for the public's benefit, it from what I hear, it looks like the lighting costs for this island, which are roughly $8 million, potentially will likely come from the legislative appropriation. Is that fair?
That is correct. Obviously, the mayor knows a lot more, and some of you do too, because it's been a 6 or 7 year battle. So there's been an $8 million allotment for that out of the FDM money. And also there's some grants, I understand, coming from there. We got to research and get all the information there. But the mayor has more on the lights possible.
Yeah, that was one of the requests we had for that $350 million appropriation that came out of Tallahassee. That was put in by Tidal Basin as one of our many requests. Some were grants, some were our understanding. If I'm mistaken, please correct me. But my understanding as of right now, the majority of that funding will be appropriated as a loan, not as a grant. But this $8 million from what we've been told so far, is going to be looked at more as a grant, not as a loan. So some of the other things that we have put in for, hopefully will get approved. And then how it kind of works is you got to put in for it, they approve it as a loan, and then you work to trying to get that relieved through other legislative sessions as you move forward. One of the things I think that the town manager touched on was the loan. If we all remember the $10 million loan we had from way back when to do the 3 capital improvement projects, that was a very low interest loan that the bank has been very good with working with us on extending the time frame as to how we can draw down on that. So that's allowing us to get some of these things done at Bayside Park. Unfortunately, they wouldn't be willing to move into other areas outside of that area to use that funding, but it's in today's rates, a very low interest in comparison. So it's a funding source for us to be able to start these projects, to be able to get that reimbursement back from FEMA. As we all know, we've heard it 1,000 times, you have to spend the money to get the money back to repair it. So this is giving us an avenue to be able to start to do that, start that money engine, if you will, coming back into the town. Because I have been asked, why are we working with the ball fields, and that's why. It's a funding source that's in place. And in talking with our delegation up in Tallahassee, they're very hesitant on just giving money away. They want to show that you're at least trying to take loans out to pay for it and then work through it that way. So we're doing the best that we can. We're certainly going to continue to ask. But the lighting thing, we have someone coming this week, hopefully, to give us the final approval on the light fixtures. So that can, if everything goes well tomorrow and the next day, hopefully we'll be able to get that project started as soon as December of this year.
I think that's really helpful. Thank you. And I think one last piece of the puzzle, if memory serves me, it seems like we got, prior to Ian, we got $1 million from FDOT for Times Square. Are those funds still out there? Joe, I know that was before you got here, but has that ever crossed your desk?
That does not sound familiar to me, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
I'm looking
I
at
thought we
Jason,
got
he's
those
shaking
and
his
then
head,
they-
yes.
Well, I thought we got them and then they were taken
Pushed them
away.
back.
Oh,
Maybe before we have this, maybe we should open up the budget part, since this is going to be.
Oh, I thought this was. I thought this
Maybe
was.
we've got a motion to open it back up, and this is the discussion. So let's approve to open it back up, and then we'll continue the discussion.
That's what I thought we were doing, but I'm happy to do that,
We
do that
did.
procedurally
We did
first.
open it. Yeah,
We did? Well, we never voted on it, but I asked for discussion, and then he jumped in.
No, we said aye.
Did we?
Yeah.
I thought that was on the last one, not on item B.
It was on both.
As long as we're open. Okay.
Someone's keeping track.
So just on that $1 million, Jason, you said it was pushback. How could you define pushback?
Jason Freeman, Director of Public Works, for the record. Yeah, so we've been in contact with FDOT. I'm familiar with, there was a request out there for around $1 million to replace all those pavers in Times Square. So they've pushed that back to the next fiscal year for FDOT, and then we'll go through that application process and everything. But
So we've lost the money and would need to reapply?
I don't believe so. I will get clarification on it. They're well aware that we still are interested in the project, and we would really love that funding. So I'll double check with them. But I think they just pushed it to the next FDOT fiscal year.
Okay,
For
thank
that
you.
cycle. So
I thought if I remember correctly, the discussion was that we wouldn't be able to use that funding or use the matching of that funding in time.
Right.
That's why we put off going after that funding and
Right.
waiting another year. That was obviously before the hurricane
Right.
hit, but if I remember, it was because we weren't going to be able to meet the deadline to be able to use those funds.
I think there's some truth to that, but I do think that they figured out a way to be able to utilize them, again, pre-storm. And I'm sure it's a lot different now, so. Sure.
yeah, we'll get an update with FDOT, but they've been more than willing to work with us on it. So,
Great.
for those papers.
Hate to lose that money. That was good. Thank you.
If I may, also on the big ball field in Bay Oaks, we have a $1 million grant that's a $1 million match. That's why we have to focus there. We don't want to lose that kind of money. So that's why that project's moving. The next step.
Now, we've heard about the professional baseball, and we've heard about 7-Eleven, but we have a $1 million grant for the baseball field?
A matching grant.
Who's that from? I don't think that, is that, we've already discussed that?
Yeah, so that grant is in reference to the one, I believe, a year or two ago. The town applied for it and got that with the LWCF, the Land Water Conservation Fund, and that's for redoing the sports field and doing some pickleball courts, resurfacing tennis courts, and a couple other items on there.
And that's all pre-Ian.
That was pre-in, and so we've been in communication with them too, just telling them, we're on kind of a holding pattern, just getting everything cleaned up and then ready for that. But I believe we have until next year to use that money if we decide to.
And that's, so we match the 1 million and we could, with them.
Correct.
Oh, got it.
Yes, so it's I believe it's a total of a $2 million with a $1 million match.
Very good, thank you.
So sure.
And is that something that you're going to be able to?
Jason just stayed.
That you're going to be able to
A lot of
implement?
historical, yeah.
Because I imagine when we eventually build a municipal complex, it's going to be pretty destructive to the things that are in the
Sure,
ground
so that's
there.
something that we'll work with internally, I guess, with town staff as well. But we've kind of just been working with them on what the original plan was. Submitted to that grant application was including that redevelopment in there, but we'll just have to check and see what we're planning on changing. But I think a lot of it's still going to tie in and work with that large field in the back, if we proceed with that and the pickleball courts and that sort of thing. So it's I think we're on track if we choose to use that money.
Thanks, Jason.
Sure.
All right.
Don't go far.
Do you have more questions? You want Joe to go through his?
You have something to go through first?
We've got a
Joe?
presentation.
Oh, I'm
here,
sorry,
I
go
do.
ahead. Yeah.
And it might tie in with
Fair
maybe
enough.
some of your questions.
All good.
Okay, I'll try to go through this. Some of this is required for the hearing, so it might be repeat for you, so I'll try to go as quickly as I can. I wanted to just give you a kind of an outline of what's included in this presentation, to talk about the challenges, the resulting total budget, the proposed millage rate and how it compares to the rollback rate, some tax charts, general fund budget by department, the funding strategy for the general fund, the total budget by fund. We're required to talk about our debt service, and then at the very end I have some proposed corrections to be made to the budget that was already distributed to you and posted. Okay, so the budget challenges, this is what we reviewed the last time. There was a significant loss of revenue. There's uncertainty of funding for disaster recovery. There was inflation of 5.9%. This is as of July 2023. We have a challenge of attracting and retaining qualified personnel. We do have needed additional personnel to support our recovery efforts. And then there's also a desire to maintain the millage rate. As far as the major revenue losses, we've lost almost $2.8 billion of taxable property value due to Hurricane Ian, and that has resulted in a $1.8 million loss of revenue if we were to hold the millage rate the same. And then on top of that loss of revenue, we have a $1.6 million projected loss in parking revenue due to the reduction in tourism. Then the uncertainty of funding to support disaster recovery, although there are many efforts underway and things are falling into place slowly. We do know we're expecting reimbursement from FEMA, community disaster loan. There's a CDBG-RDR, state appropriations. We already have the bridge loan. There's Resilient Lee, et cetera. So it's just the uncertainty of the timing and the amounts that has made it difficult to incorporate it into the budget. So we'll be doing so as we go along through budget amendments. So we've only incorporated what we have actually received so far, and that would be the bridge loan. Of course, we've had the American Rescue Plan Act funds now for a few years. In terms of attracting and retaining personnel, there was a compensation study that was done. The outcome was a recommendation to adjust compensation for several positions, and that total adjustment equated to about $70,000. That's built into the budget along with the cost of the employer's share of payroll taxes.
Joe, before you move on from this,
Yeah.
because there's been some talk about, obviously we never had a person like you before. we never had an HR director. We never had some things like that. In what you have found out since you came on board with how raises and how salaries were adjusted, can you explain just a little bit for those that are watching the reason why this was necessary to be able to compete with other municipalities?
Well, probably Talisa will do a much better job than I can do, but I'll try. From what I understand, things within the town, as probably most municipalities, as you progress, the people who are here, they may be getting increases. I think there was maybe inconsistency in how the increases were given. And so as time moves on, things kind of get out of balance in terms of some positions are being paid more than others, in terms of how they balance within the whole of the organization. And then you have the comparison to outside organizations from where we're trying to attract new personnel to fill vacancies, or we're losing personnel to the surrounding municipalities because they are paying much better wages. And so I think the study was done in order to make sure that what we're offering the employees is competitive. Now, obviously, we're a smaller town, so that's also taken into account, and it's kind of scaled down in that respect. But in terms of just the overall competitiveness, they tried to make some adjustments to certain positions in terms of what the market study that was done of surrounding towns. And then they also wanted to incorporate into this compensation study the concept of where a person would lie. So within the job grade itself, so you have a position, but there's like a spectrum of salary that you could earn within there depending on the number of years and your qualifications. So they tried to incorporate that as well into it. And so they tried to kind of have a systematic approach to how salary should be set so that we're consistent with our surrounding area, competitive as best we can be, and then also within the organization to try to make sure that there isn't something out of balance where maybe one department is being paid more than another, and there's actually employees doing very similar duties. So that was also addressed. And so the end result was actually a very modest adjustment in total of $70,000.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay. All right, then this is a list, again, you've seen this before, of all the personnel that were added to the general fund. It's a total of 14.3. We've got code compliance in here. We have the new positions that were added in order to assist with administration and also the recovery efforts. We've got maintenance workers. Some of this was a reflection of bringing on employees who were contractors. So their cost may have been seen on a contractual services line item, but now they're being seen on the personnel side.
Before you move on from that one, because that's kind of a pretty big thing. So I see the number here, but some of those are, I assume, like paid from permit fees and things? If they're like the compliance officers, code compliance, that kind of thing?
Well, not in this version of the budget. We temporarily, with this year, we moved code compliance out of the general fund into the building fund where they would be funded by permit revenue. But now, going forward, we're moving them back to the general fund. They will not be funded by permit revenue. So there'll be kind of like a separation between code enforcement and then the actual, the building permit process.
So why is it going back and forth like that?
When you looked at the organizational chart when I got here and saw that the community development went like this, the span of control was just too wide for a director. So we moved that out, put it back the way it was prior to me getting here. I guess at the last budget, I would imagine it was moved over there. So we just put it back because we felt like it was a better way to control it and to enforce the process and the program.
But now we have income coming from permit fees and from short-term rental fees that should go for this, right? We prefer to take it out of that fund than we do the general fund.
Correct. The fees are still being put into the general fund, which is not a apples to apples, but it still should be a wash. They're not going back into the building fund. When you get building fund, you can only spend building fund dollars on building fund things, and you have other things that need to be done as well. There's some things we'll propose going into next year about, some of these new developments coming on, these larger ones, instead of, paying fees into the building fund, which you can grow and grow and grow, but you can only use it for certain things. you put it in the general fund, and then you can use it for several things, projects and that type of thing. So this just seemed like the better way to do things, the better way to have a span of control and to control it a little differently, to separate it from the building and the codes, and again, that span of control to reduce that a little bit. It's 2.5 employees, I believe.
Now, another question. I see you said 14.3 FTEs, but a lot of those are conversions from a contractor to an employee, and they show up here. So any idea of how many of those are actual real new bodies and how many are just conversions?
Well, just looking at the list, I can see that, let's see, I would say the systems administrator, that was a contractual services position. The environmental project manager, that was a contractual position. And then each of those positions are also requesting assistance. So there would be an intern for the environmental project manager, and then there'd be an assistant for the systems administrator.
I think also the IT support, that was brought in-house, so that was a person that was here, but it's just now no longer a contract employee.
Community Development Director was contracted.
Yes, that's true.
Executive assistant to the town manager was already a current employee, we just shifted over, so changed the title, but it's employees that we had here, or people that were working at some fashion at the town.
Well,
Some were
same
con-
with human resources manager. We had a human resource manager. This is a replacement of her because she left
was
us,
contract-
right?
she was a
Oh, she
contract.
was contractor?
He was a contractor.
Okay.
The
Okay.
one after.
Yeah. Well, that's something I would appreciate like we did with the fees. I'd appreciate knowing what the real financial impact of this is, not just of the cost of these people, but also adding in the savings of wherever they were, or however they worked before.
Right, because there would be a savings if you go from a contractor to a full-time employee because you're not paying all the upcharges for that too, potentially. I mean, you still have now benefits, but it would probably be a wash, but they would be in-house versus contracting.
Yeah, and there's some new positions, and I also understand that where we are now to the storm, there's some things like Frank that we really need that kind of help to make sure we don't stub our toe and end up getting clawback, et cetera, et cetera. But I just be interested in knowing, because this, the total I think you have here on your sheet before was, almost $1 million. And that's a scary number. So I'd like to see what that really is. You know what I mean?
Yes, I can have that for you
One
for
to
next
one,
time.
We're just making all kinds of homework for you there, aren't we?
Okay.
Who needs sleep, Joe?
Well,
And of course, what you don't see on here is the positions that have been vacant the last year that we haven't filled due to just certain reasons. Lifeguards are not on there, so even though they'll be budgeted, it's not been spent the whole last year. So there's some of that too in here. Lifeguards, and I think a couple employees in the Parks and Recreation, like special events and senior and youth athletics, things like that were not filled during the year because we didn't have a need for them that will show up again, but they're budgeted.
Yeah, and I see all that kind of in a mixed report about what is really costing us with the personnel changes and moving.
okay. Okay, and then this is, we have a stormwater utility tech in the stormwater fund, and then we have 16 and a half new positions in the building fund. So there's a total of 31.8 positions. Okay, so the result in terms of the total budget is a $12.1 million budget for the general fund and a $52 million budget in total, all funds, including the general fund. So we are proposing to keep the millage rate the same for FY24 as it was for FY23, so that is 0.99. The rollback rate of 0.829 is the millage rate that's necessary to generate the same amount of tax revenue as was generated the prior year, using the current year's appraised value before you take into account any additions like new construction or deletions, which has to do with the damage caused by Hurricane Ian. So although the proposed millage
And I just have
rate...
to go back. That, once I hear we lost $40,000 in revenue, and then we hear we'd have a lower rollback rate to bring in the same revenue that we had, but we lost 40%. So that
43%.
number, Yeah, so that number seems odd. I mean, because that rollback rate would not generate the same amount of revenue we had last year.
That's why he was saying it does not into account damage caused by Hurricane Ian.
That's correct.
That would be if there was no damage caused from Hurricane Ian.
Exactly. So that's how they calculate the rollback rate, is by looking at what it would look like before the damage is deducted. And because there were increases in property tax values theoretically for those homes that weren't damaged, if there exist, that increase is where, because of the increase, you end up with a rollback rate that's lower than the 0.99. Okay, so although the proposed millage rate of 0.99 for FY24 is the same as it was in FY23, it represents a 19.42% increase when compared to the rollback rate of 0.8290. So that's what's going out in the trim notices. It's showing that we have a 19.42% increase because it's comparing those two rates.
But again, what it's not telling you in the trim notice is that was if nothing was to happen from Hurricane Ian, or nothing would have happened from Hurricane Ian.
That's correct, and that's what this next slide addresses. So again, you start out the same way. Although the proposed millage rate of 0.99 for FY24 is the same as FY23, it represents a $1.8 million or a 42.6% reduction in ad valorem tax revenue compared to what was collected in FY23. So it's totally different in terms of the actual revenue that we'd be collecting. Here's just a few graphs that kind of give you an idea of how the average taxable assessed value has changed. And by average, this is taking into account the damage caused by Hurricane Ian. So the average value, if you take the total taxable value of all the property in the island divided by the number of units, you end up with a much lower average assessed value. So it's gone from 456,000 last year to 200. I can't read that. 265. Yeah. And then the same thing in terms of the amount of revenue that would generate. So last year that would have generated for us $451 on that average value. This coming year it's only going to be $262 on that same average amount. And this gives you a pie chart of what all the pieces of a typical property tax bill is allocated to. That red slice is the town of Fort Myers Beach, and it's only 6% of the total property tax bill.
So, Joe,
Yes.
don't gloss over that one, because I think it's important. Could you just go through, so when somebody gets their property tax bill, can you just, because nobody can see that, could you just go through if they look at their property tax bill, often in shock,
Yes.
can you give them a sense as to what most of that money goes to?
Sure, and even I can't read it from here, so I'm going to have to look at my printout. So we've got 1% is going to water management, the Okeechobee Levee, Fort Myers Beach Mosquito, 1% goes there. Fort Myers Beach Library is 1%. Lee County Solid Waste Assessment is 3%. Fort Myers Beach Fire District is 18%. The public school, as assessed or levied by the local board, is 19%. Water Management District is 0.6%. Water Management Evergrade is 0.2%. West Coast Inland Navigation District is 0.2%. Lee County Hyacinth Control is 0.1%. The public school is levied by state law is 28%, so that's really the largest share goes to public school. That combined with the local share of 19%. And then we have Lee County General, which is 23%.
So so
Lee County General, you mean the county, Lee County.
Right,
Yep,
the county
20%.
itself.
And the
20.
town of Fort Myers Beach is 6% of your bill?
6%.
Yeah, thank you.
and 47% of your trim notice goes to some sort of school board
That's correct.
funding.
That's correct.
I think what you were trying to get at, Vice Mayor Holt, is the number you see in your trim note is 6% actually goes to the town of Fort Myers Beach.
That's correct. Okay.
That doesn't mean we shouldn't be good stewards of our dollars, but nonetheless, it's a small portion of the overall property tax bill. Yeah.
6%.
Okay. Should I advance the slide?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So the net change in the two groupings of budget. So if you look at general fund only, we've decreased actually from FY23 to 24 by $2.1 million. And then in terms of the total funds, we've decreased by almost $1.1 million. And I think the reason for the decrease, if you want to look for one major factor, is that we're not contributing anything to the capital fund this year. And part of that is because we don't have the revenue to do that, and part of it is we're prohibited to do that because we have the bridge loan right now. And then this... I'm
Joe,
sorry.
while you're on this
Yes.
capital fund, are you going to get to the $10 million grant that we received for our stormwater as well as the ARPA money? Is that going to blend into your presentation, or is now a good time to talk about that?
You could. I actually don't have the $10 million grant for stormwater incorporated into this, but
I just, when you say you don't have any money in here for capital projects, obviously one of our larger infrastructure costs going forward is continuing to improve our stormwater system. And to have a $10 million grant coming obviously has some impact on our overall fiscal situation, so it seems like that's worth mentioning.
yes,
Fair?
thank you. It is.
Okay. And then the ARPA dollars, they could be utilized as well, correct? How much is remaining from the ARPA dollars after this budget cycle?
Oh,
Ballpark.
it's just over $2 million because we're going to be using 800 and some thousand of it for to balance the general fund budget. There's a few $100,000 that is going to be utilized to help pay for the temporary location for town hall. After all the other funding pays its share, then our share would be paid by ARPA. And then I believe there's a small portion that would help to continue to pay for Tidal Basin for the expenses that we will not be reimbursed for, and that would be for their assistance with obtaining or applying for grants, appropriations, and I believe hazard mitigation is another area that their fees would not be reimbursed, but we will certainly benefit from them.
So would that use up the remaining ARPA funds, or does that leave us $2 million after
It would leave us about $2 million, just over $2 million.
Is there any concern or any timeline in terms of how quickly we have to use that? Could we lose that, or?
Well, yes, we would lose it if we do not use it by the end of next year. But there are, several projects in the
Yep.
works that could certainly be used for.
So that's not a concern.
No, it's not. And we can certainly, if all else fails and we can't figure out how to use it, we can use it instead of the bridge loan for operations.
I just think it's important, as we have a lot of sky is falling news here, I think it's important for the public to understand some of the positive dynamics going on behind the scenes as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that now, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, is that the stormwater money would go to the stormwater fund.
That's correct.
And so it could potentially pay down that fund, and that's paid by utilities, right? The utility bill?
When you say pay it down, I'm not quite sure what.
Well,
you mean.
we borrowed all this money to do our stormwater system, and now we're using proceeds from the utility bill, right, to pay that off?
Yes, we should be, yes.
Yes. So if we are getting money into that fund that we're not paying off, then even though it may not affect our tax structure, it could affect people's utility bills favorably.
Well, that isn't my understanding, but I don't know details. I think the cost of the stormwater projects are quite significant, and I think that grant probably would be, well, and we can only use it for the stormwater projects anyway. It's not that it can just be added to the fund balance and lower our rates as a result, but it would have to be used for the stormwater projects.
But we
Counselor?
would be spending money anyway for that from other sources, probably, the loans or bonds.
Well, yes, yes, I could see what maybe a different way to look at it, at least for me, would be to say that we don't have to raise the rates as much to obtain the funding, the capital that we need to do those projects, because it's coming in as a form of a grant.
But I think to your point, Councilor Veach, is the we wouldn't necessarily want to pay off loans with those dollars because we are able to acquire loans through the state revolving loan fund, which is a very low interest process. So we might be better off paying off something else that has higher interest and or using it for something. But the bottom line is it's good. I mean, it's nice to have it there. Yeah.
And like I said, it may not show up in your property taxes,
But it-
decrease in your property tax, but it could show up as a decrease in other expenses that
Yeah.
people incur.
Or less of an increase. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and then this just represents the general fund budget by department, so it just shows how each department changed in terms of total expense for the year. That one general government where it shows a decrease of 3.3 million, that's a reflection of our not contributing to capital. We had a significant capital contribution that came out of this year into the capital fund. We're not repeating that next year, and that's why we have such a huge difference on that general government line.
If we could just get rid of that first item up there, we'd save some money.
Well, look.
And did I hear you right, Joe, saying that one of the requirements of the bridge loan was that you could not contribute money into the general fund or into the capital?
Well, we're not allowed to use the bridge loan to pay for capital.
Right.
And so, if we were to contribute to capital, we'd have to use that much more of the bridge loan, which we can't do. So that's why we're not doing it. But there is a significant capital fund balance, so it's not going to stop us from doing what we had already planned on doing for the next few years. We just can't add any more to it right now.
I think, too, that kind of does mesh pretty well with a lot of the money coming in goes towards capital items,
Yeah,
other grants and whatnot.
that's true. So we do have other funding sources. Okay, and then this is the remainder of the general fund departments, and you can see like another decrease from year over year is Bay Oaks Recreation Center, and that's basically because of the delay in opening, so there's less expense anticipated. Okay, so the total is a $2.1 million decrease in general fund. Okay, and then this is just a graph of showing where the money goes. So it's a graphic representation by category. So you've got services, 27%, wages, 40%, that's the largest expense, benefits, 13%, liability insurance, looks like 8%. So this just breaks it down by category. And then this is the same slide that I showed you previously. It's just kind of the rationale for how the general fund is funded. It's a strategy for it. So if you were to just look at the pure revenue that we collected in FY20, or we're projecting to collect in FY24, it's 7.1 million. What we collected in FY23 was 10.6. So that reduction is $3.5 million of what I'm terming pure revenue. And so that $3.5 million is what we can use the bridge loan to cover. And then the rest of the increase would be covered by the $500,000 that we're transferring back from Estero Boulevard lighting that was moved into the capital fund this year. We can move it back out. We're using $175,000 that was accumulated of refunds from Benecon. That was the insurance consortium we had been a part of. And then the rest, that $826,000, is ARPA funds. Okay, and then this is just a graphical representation of that. Where you see transfers other, we could have probably broken that out further to show that how much of that transfer was bridge loan, how much of it was from the ARPA fund. But that's where those pieces of funding are going. They're represented as transfers. Okay, and then this is all funds. So each line represents a fund, and these are all the funds that were budgeted, so the total difference at the bottom right-hand column is almost $1.1 million less. And then this is a graphical representation by category of where the money goes. So there's almost 20% is just contingency, and that's in the various funds. So it's just perhaps revenues coming in that have not been budgeted yet, that are being accumulated for the future or for unexpected needs this year. Liability insurance represents 3% in total. Capital expenditures, 32%. And quite a bit of that is in the stormwater water area where there's projects, large projects underway. And then in relation to the whole wages is only 14%. And then this is a graphical representation of where all the money's coming from it for the entire town
Can you
budget.
just go back for a minute, because I'm
Sure.
looking at this. There's a gray area there that I don't see anything associated with it.
Oh, no. You're right.
Light gray on the right there,
You're,
above commodities.
you're right. I think, yeah, I can't even guess what that would have been. I think because it probably was too large of a title and somehow it just disappeared. I will correct that for next time.
Thank you.
Sure, I'm sorry about that.
That's all right.
It's hard to know what's not there.
It's the Alto Eagle Fund.
Okay. And then, okay, so I think I talked about this. So we're almost there. So debt service, this is the last piece that's required for the presentation. We do have the $10 million capital improvement note. This is what's been referenced as the loan that was taken out. It's up to $10 million. It doesn't mean we have to spend $10 million or that we already have $10 million, but we can draw down up to $10 million. This was for Bay Oaks, for Times Square, for Bayside Park improvements. The loan is about to officially expire per the original agreement November 18th, but the bank is willing to work with us in extending it another 6 months, and that would be till May 15th. There is a fixed repayment plan already established of $48,000 a month that would start roughly 12 or December of next year, and we would just make that payment monthly until whatever amount we end up borrowing is paid off. The interest rate is 3.15%.
So a question for you, Andy. Is there any way we are going to be able to spend that money in the 6 months, or is that something we're just going to, I mean, and is the interest rate worth doing extraordinary measures to try to do that?
So I'm going to say yes. There are ways we're going to be able to spend that money strictly because of what we've got happening. Because you got to also something that I just made a note. You guys need to know. I know that when we were looking at Bayside Park, we were talking to the engineers and architects. They were coming back to put it back the way that it was like $1.2 or $3 million. We did it for just a little over 500. So there's a big cost savings there. But also
I think you need to expound on that. So when you're saying the firm that built it originally.
That is correct. The firm that built it originally came to us, and we sat down with them because we're like, that's where we start, right? With the guys who did it. And we got to looking at it, and I'm like, no, we can do better. And we did. And 500 is coming back, which means it goes back somewhere else to use somewhere else, so you get to use the money twice. So those are the type of things we're doing. So we saved by about $550,000 there. And then also with the Little League field, with the work we got done donated from the guys doing the beach, we saved about $600,000. So that's $1 million that we've already saved just with the two projects. That thank you to Frank. He's a little modest. He's got a hurt shoulder from patting himself on the back in my office. But no, seriously, that's the things we're doing. So. It might be hard to spend it because we're trying to do it so wisely and be good stewards of our money that it may be hard to get to that number. But I think we've got it figured almost to the dollar with the park, with the baseball field, some of the things we want to do with the Little League field, some of the things we want to do with the recreation center, some of the other projects around town with the other park down this way. Sorry, I don't remember the name of it. That was where we piled all the beach stuff. Newton Park. Some of the things we're going to do there. But again, there's some things going to be reimbursed by FEMA. So it's really chicken and egg type thing. We're going to spend the money to be able to get money recouped from FEMA. That's going to help us get there. So yes, I think there's $5.5 million out of that 10.
As far as what's left?
Yeah, of that. 10 million capital improvement note?
It's like
There's
six.
6.7 million.
See, so it's not the full amount. So I think pretty sure with the projects we have in the pipeline that we're going to be working on the next 2 weeks to 8 months, we will not have trouble getting to that number.
And I'll tell you one thing. No, sorry, Karen, you going to speak?
No, I was just going to ask a question, but go ahead.
One thing that kind of does give me some real pause is I'm a little nervous about basically all of our staff being in trailers through multiple hurricane seasons going forward. This concerns me. It'd be nice if there's any way to work in even if it's a modest, resilient structure where if we do have another storm, we have somewhere where you have some kind of command center. But I don't, I know it's still very much preliminary about what the plans are for Bay Oaks. But if there's any way to finagle something we could do quickly, where we're not waiting for, 3 or 4 more hurricane seasons before we
Right.
get a structure.
Our new trailers are a little more resilient than, and fortified than what we have currently. What we have currently are very temporary structures. The plan, as we are sitting here today, is to come to you probably, I would imagine by November, to start talking to the architect, to start getting that ball rolling, and less than 6 to 8 months later, depending on BORCAB and this body, having a groundbreaking sometime later, about a year from now, so we can get some of those things started quicker than you would think. It's just the way I feel like we should operate. Just be as efficient as we can, not waste time, which is money. Move along. Yeah, obviously you can look around the island, see if there's any place to rent anything, and from what I can tell, it's not really conducive to anything we want to try to do to split up the government and move it around. So the trailers, and Frank can speak to the trailers, are probably our top. They are our top option right now, short of moving in some structure like this that's already fortified and up 20 feet. And so I think we've got a very good opportunity ahead of us to work as expeditiously as we can with the public, with the council, with the volunteer group at BORCAB, and to get something on paper. We've already got 100% drawing, so it's going to be easier to work from that now than to start from scratch. So we're really pretty far down the road. I mean, we're probably 2.5 or 3 years down the road now, just by the fact that we have those plans in place that have been done, that now we'll just alter them a little bit and move forward. So hopefully that's going to help, relax things and calm things down and move quicker. We're going to move as quick as materials and as we can legally do, and get something coming up out of the ground.
I think as folks are singing, so you're singing some praises here, and rightfully so. I think it's important, make sure I have this correct, but the quote-unquote new trailers we're getting to replace our existing trailers, we're getting literally, it will be half the cost of continuing to rent the current trailers, correct? So we're cutting our costs in half. Is that true, Frank?
That is correct, sir. So basically, I do not have any documentation at this point. We're still working on the contract. So
But
regardless of what you've read in the local paper, there is no contract secretly being held at the town hall, nor do we have one in our possession. However, that said, moving forward, we were given a challenge based on, I went to Joe and Sherry and asked them basically what we had in insurance money. And that's how the whole conversation started, trying to live within our means, trying to spend half of the insurance money based on what we received from the old town hall structure, which wasn't a lot. We were successful and able to find a company on the East Coast of Florida that can build these trailers up to about 135 mile an hour wind rating, with 175 mile an hour wind rating on their windows. So at least to stand behind a window when the real wind hits. Their anchoring system into the ground is unique, and it has stood the test of time on the East Coast and as far south as Monroe County, believe it or not. So I'm not saying it's going to help when an Ian hits, but realistically nothing would, except a hardened structure, and that unfortunately is not
But
something
as
we
people
can do.
hear this concept, they're getting all these new trailers, they're coming in at literally half the cost of what it would cost to continue to rent the existing
Yes, sir.
trailers.
Yes, sir. The ones that we got were from the state, and then they became our responsibility as of, I believe, July 13th. So we've been paying forward on that, and those are used construction trailers. These are brand new, built to our specifications. For 4 years, we will be leasing these trailers.
I think it's a great story. So I think you shouldn't be shy to tell that story. It's
Now-
a very good accomplishment.
Now, per code, are these going to have to be on wheels like the other trailers, just anchored down, or can you lift them up?
These can be lifted up, but again, these are coming in as quad wide, triple wide. So when they come in, if they're coming in as a bare unit, they're just like the Tyvek on the side. They're brought in on a trailer or wheeled, and then they're actually put on an elevated platform. And then what we do is we harden the lot by rolling it, compacting gravel, and then they're anchored about 4 to 5 feet into the ground to withstand any kind of blowing away type thing or whatever. And I've read all the material on them. I've went over to Davie, Florida, and looked at them myself, anchored into the system. They withstood winds there that were in excess of 145 mile an hour. So
Yeah, and I'm just kind of thinking about all the issues that some of our restaurants and things did where, like if they want to serve alcohol, they couldn't be on a trailer, and there was kind of left them some options. And so if they're not on wheels, are then we violating FEMA rules by building them?
we are not. They do have an axle, and they can be transported.
Okay.
And we will be serving alcohol.
But no, they are mobile, so just like we're requesting of our business owners.
And is there room to increase the grade there so we can make it a little more height off of?
We're in the process, as soon as ICS is finished with the project they've currently got going on in that space, they're going to harden the lot for us. That was part of the agreement of them using that space. So that means lifting it up and putting down a more conducive material to withstand, you're an engineer, the weights. We're not using a traditional anchoring system. We're going to be using ABS plates that are roughly about 6 inches wide by about 4 by 6 feet in diameter, about the size of a table. It's hard ABS plastic, and that will distribute the weight evenly on various corners of those trailers. And plus, with the anchoring system that they use, it's bar none for a trailer.
Thanks.
So I just wanted to confirm too, I mean, based on the interest rate that we have on this loan at 3.15, I'm assuming, and I probably know the answer, is that to go back and try to borrow any money right now, we're going to be at least double that, if not more.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I would.
So use this if we can.
Yes.
Okay.
And I would just point out that in 2030, we have the loan that long. It does, the interest rate will be reset at whatever the 10-year Treasury note is, plus 255 basis points. Okay. Then we have the bridge loan. And this, of course, we were given $11.9 million. We already have it in the bank. We're projecting to use almost $3.5 million of it. So we'd still have a balance available of $8.4 million. Of course, has a pretty stiff interest rate of 10% that is scheduled to begin on July 1st, but the original loan agreement does have a 6-month extension built into it, and this, legislation was passed where I believe it's at least 12 months, and it could be longer than that. And so as soon as we're able to apply for the extension, we will do so. But if, just theoretically, if we were not, the annual interest rate on that $3.5 million balance would be almost $350,000 a year, of course. And then what we would have to pay beginning in July, August, and September of
Why would the
next
state
year.
of Florida charge us 10% interest?
Well, this is it's hard to explain, except for this was a program that they put in place that they haven't done before to try to infuse cash into hardest hit areas as quick as possible. As you know, we were the first ones to get this. It is obviously going to be something that we're going to discuss with our delegation when we go up there here in the next month to talk about what are the plans. Now they've had some time to look at it, understand it, see who's applied for it, see who hasn't. This is one of our top appropriation requests going into this
There's
year.
a chance we could get some relief on that, I guess.
We're certainly going to try.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay.
And I don't blame you. You guys did a great job getting the bridge loan. Don't get me wrong. I'm just trying to get in the mind of the state of Florida. How do you charge a distressed community 10% after
It
a little
certainly
over a
was
year?
an eye-opener for everyone, and
Yes.
it put some hesitation in there for us, but it was a necessary thing. Again, this goes back to what I said earlier. They want to show that you're willing to do what it takes to,
I
to try
got
to.
you. I got
And
you.
there was a conversation last week I had with the Senate president. She said that, part of her negotiations with her colleagues was that it was a loan. But she's willing to look at several options. One of them pushing it further out, the repayment schedule, so you have more time to recover.
More
So
time,
there-
more time before the 10% kicks in.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then more time to recover to pay it back. So that's some options they're looking at, but we will be continuing those conversations in Tallahassee real soon.
Very good.
Okay. And then the last loan was the Florida State Revolving Fund, and this is what's used for the water and the stormwater projects. There's 4 separate loans. 2 of them are already completely drawn, and we've begun repayments on, and 2 of them are still ongoing. And so it's like the second column and the fourth column are the ones that are still, we're still drawing down from. I think I have that right. Yeah. And so, but it's something that is concerning is we were given, if you see the red on the bottom there, that we were given a reprieve from having to make any payments in this year because of the hurricane and also next year, so we don't have to make any payments. But beginning in 2025, our annual payment is going to be almost $3.4 million. So we have to make sure that we'll be generating enough revenue in those funds to pay that, to begin making those payments.
What's the total outstanding debt right now, Joe?
It is almost 62 million.
We're at $62 million?
Yes. Well, we've already been making payments against it. It started a few years ago. I want to say the first payment was in 2019. So some payments have been made.
So Jason, are we continuing to take on additional debt as we continue our projects? Or do we have enough already that we don't need to do that? Or Joe?
Yes, I am aware that there is continual draws on what's available to.
Do you have any sense as to what we're going to max out on in terms of our debt to the state revolving?
Well, I mean, only the max available with these loans is at 62,631,000. So we're projecting that we'll use all of it because it's only like less than $1 million more.
So that'll be our cap in terms of debt
for
the revolving loan
with
fund?
these loans, for these loans.
So we don't have significant aspirational goals for additional infrastructure construction that will go beyond this?
Well, we have the $30 million stormwater grant, right?
Well, we do have the grant, and then, I don't know if you know, Jason. I'm not aware of what the
I guess
plans
the
are.
question what I'm curious about is the tiers that haven't been started, the side street stormwater tiers that haven't been started. Is that already been incorporated into the $61 million that's been used?
No, no. This is what we actually have already used.
Oh,
Wow.
Yeah.
So,
well, if you
So-
could, before the next meeting, at least for my sense, try to figure out what the remaining tiers are and how much money we're really talking about.
Could we project the overall potential debt for the town? These
So
are,
could that $30 million grant, though, be used for what we're,
I think you mean 10 million?
$10 million
or
grant.
10 million, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
The $10 million could be used. The question is, how do we best use it? In other words, given the interest rates we're looking at right here, it's pretty darn good. So we'd have to strategically consider how to use the 10 million best. But it would be great to see what the projected overall debt will be after all these projects are done. I know we're starting to pay this down, but it sounds like we're taking on additional debt as well. And as the mayor said, the phases of those additional projects and what will we max out in terms of debt? And then I'd be curious, just from your perspective, how that compares to other communities, given this type of a project. Do we need to pull back a little bit on this, or does it keep you awake at night? I mean, we'll need to know that, Joe.
okay. I will get as much information
Or
as
Jason,
I can.
or Frank, or Andy, whatever. I don't think we've seen that number in a long time, Mr. Mayor.
No, we haven't, and I think it's
No.
important, looking at what you said there with the annual payments going to be on that. And then you mentioned we need to make sure that we have the money in that fund to be able to, I don't want to set staff or us or our residents up for failure, so we need to know what we're looking at and what that annual payment could potentially be and where we're at in relation now to what it's going to have to be when it's all said and done.
Yes, I understand.
So are these the remaining side streets? Because it seems like we've done a number of side streets, right? Jason? I mean,
I
just
know we've done-
ballpark. You don't have to give us minutiae, but
I know we've done side streets that are attached to Xterra Boulevard.
Yeah,
Not all
I
of 'em.
apologize. Jason Freeman, Public Works for the record. A lot of these projects are newer to me as well. They were previously with the Utilities Department, so we do have someone guiding through right now, someone on staff that can get an update for us for the next meeting. So
that'd be great.
we'll take a look at it,
Is that
check and
Steve?
see.
Is that
Yeah,
Steve?
we need Steve here at the next meeting.
Yep, correct. So.
Yeah,
Yeah, if he could walk us through this slide, that'd be great, what projects
Sure.
he's got planned.
As far as I understand, I think a lot of these go back for at least a couple of years into a lot of those water and stormwater improvements that we've been working on for
Yeah. And
quite a while.
Many
so.
of them were great projects. I'm
Sure.
just curious as to where we are and how much further we're going to go in debt to accomplish our goals.
Right, exactly, and then eventually looking at the potential rate study to tackle these as well. So we'll get it all together and get it to you.
excuse me, Mr. Vice Mayor, they're going to be coming to you on the 25th meeting with a proposal. Already picked out a contractor to continue with the tier 1 through 2, I believe. So that's already wrapped up and ready to bring to council.
I appreciate that, and I think too, Jason, when you talk to Steve, if he could, because he's got a pretty good background in this area.
Sure.
We raised utility rates significantly about a year and a half ago, so we could fund our actual costs appropriately. The general fund would no longer have to subsidize our utilities, which they no longer do, which is great public policy. But I'd be curious to know from Steve's perspective as he looks at this, are those rates, are they, what I see, excessive? In other words, are they bringing us more revenue than expected? Obviously, Ian has a huge impact on that.
Right.
And you almost need to maybe get somebody to do a rate study at some point, but
Right.
there's a lot of variables. But it'd be interesting to hear his perspective on that.
Yeah, and that's something that we'll definitely get caught up on all this and get that information to you.
Thank
So.
But would it be better to see that layout at the town council meeting when we're talking about approving this next go-around rather than at the budget meeting in the evening?
I would, assuming our attorney doesn't have any problems with that, it just seems like a logical thing, Counselor Woodson.
So we were just talking about having the layout of all these funds and where it's going, where they've been accumulated, that kind of thing. And we just heard on the 25th that they're going to be asking for approval to go forward with this next phase of stormwater within our streets that are still flooding. So wouldn't it be good to have all of this layout and recommendation and here's where this has all gone at our council meeting as opposed to waiting for the budget meeting in the evening since we have to vote on things in the morning?
You could you could do whatever informational stuff you have during the meeting. Now, it may stretch to the 5 o'clock meeting.
Which, that's fine,
Which
but
is
just to
fine,
have an
yeah.
idea while we're
I
voting on
think I'm-
proceeding.
I think it's a great idea, and I think I'm going to disinvite the weatherman now from speaking on that particular meeting. So no more Mr. Weatherman. We got too much work to do.
I think Frank already said that Steve's planning on being here at the meeting
Yes,
to
that is
update
correct.
us as what
Yeah, so
where
they're
we're at.
going to have the new plan going forward, or the new proposal for the tiers going forward, and at that time, we can have him prepared to give you all the information that you wanted.
And I did want to mention too with the SRF, the town has historically worked with a couple consultants as well. Andrew Brewer and Tetra Tech have also been involved with this and should be able to give us some information as well. So.
All right. Thanks, Jason.
Sure.
Okay. So I think we're up to my last slide. This would be some corrections that I'm proposing to be made to the budget that kind of came up after I sent it out. And we became aware that the state, the Department of Revenue, had actually provided some updated forecasts for some of these revenue line items. And so I want to increase the state communication services revenue by $145,000, the state revenue sharing by $20,000, and then we need to reduce the half-cent sales tax budget by $115,000. So the total change is actually we're $50,000 more in revenue. So we need to reduce the amount that we're taking from the bridge loan by 50,000. And then there's just a small correction in the debt service payment line item that we need to make. I mean, it normally wouldn't make such a small correction, but in order to keep the balance between the funds correct, we had to make that $1,380 correction. And then we just found out that short-term rental software is actually $4,000 more than what we budgeted, so we wanted to use this opportunity to correct that. So that's a total increase to the general fund of $5,380. So then moving down to the bridge loan lines, that's its own fund, and so we're reducing the amount that's being transferred out to the general fund by 50,000, which means we're using 50,000 less of the fund balance for where the bridge loan money is sitting. And then the ARPA funds, we're increasing it by $5,380, so we're transferring that much more out of the ARPA fund into the general fund, which means we need to reduce the amount that's available to spend by $5,380. And then lastly, because we're updating the amount that we have available to draw from in the $10 million loan that we just looked at a few slides ago, because we're submitting a new draw in the next few weeks here, we need to reduce that by $424,000. So these are the corrections I would like to make in the budget. This is considered Exhibit B, and so I'm asking that someone make an amendment or make a motion, I should say, to amend Resolution 23-105, fiscal year 24 tentative budget. And then in the section where it says now therefore, section 2, the wording should be the town council does hereby adopt the tentative annual budget for fiscal year 2023-24, attached here to and incorporated herein is Exhibit A. So all of that is
So moved.
unchanging.
So moved.
It's only the last sentence or last phrase in yellow that would be added. So
I get the impression that was just a little too easy on you there, Jim. I think
No, I think that's very appropriate. I'll defer to our town attorney on that parliamentary inquiry. I just moved with the,
Just so moved is a perfectly good motion when it was laid out.
I'll second.
All right, do we have any discussion or questions for Joe before we vote on this? Joe, I want to say this was very informative, very transparent. As long as I've been sitting around up here, being involved in this has been very helpful. You've been very engaging over the last couple of weeks, meeting with us individually to kind of lay it out and hear our thoughts and putting this presentation together. I think people watching at home will be able to easily understand it. And it's very, as I said, very transparent. So I appreciate you taking the time to do all this.
well, thank you. And,
I'll second that too.
the longer I'm here, the better it'll get. So thank you.
And I'll tell you too that this is a scary budget because it's so chaotic. I mean, revenues are like all the previous years. We had little incremental changes in revenues. Now everything's out the window. So you did did a good job of describing that chaos in the most understandable light possible.
Thank you.
We have a motion. We have a second. Is there any other discussion? Madam Attorney, so can we vote on this, or do we have to table it and go back, or we can vote?
You can
on
vote on it.
And then go back to the minute. Okay, great.
Yes.
So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries unanimously. We will now go back. Is there a motion to reopen Resolution 23-103, proposed ad valorem millage rate?
So moved.
I will second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay. Is there any discussion that we need to have on this now that we've
No.
gone through everything?
No.
Is there a motion to approve Resolution 23-104 for the ad valorem of .99?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries unanimously. Final public comment. Any of you fabulous employees want to come up and say how good those donuts were this morning? Anything? Nothing?
You didn't even get eaten.
Seeing none, we'll close final public comment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned at